Due to popular demand, I started to make a short little 10 minutes at max video on Night Terror's Robins and Nightwing. If you couldn't tell by the video length alone, upon rereading these two stories, I found a lot of things that I want to talk about. Since I have way less to talk about with Dickie over here, I'll just start with him. So without further ado, as my grandpappy used to say, let's get into the chicken and pasta of this video. So, Nightwing's story has him locked in Arkham, working with some villains in order to solve a mystery as his nightmare. I know, the premise sounds nonsensical and stupid, which, well, to be fair it is, but just read it, I promise it works. A lot of what I really enjoyed from the story was actually from how Dick was portrayed. If you've lost me, let me explain. I have a few gripes with how modern Nightwing has been portrayed in both comics and the greater media. In most animated movies and games, Dick is unironically a Vegeta tier jobber, just kinda there to look pretty, get captured, or get his ass beat, or both. Which really sucks because Dick should be on Batman's levels in terms of capabilities as a vigilante. Dick isn't the only character that suffers from this issue, but I'll talk about that much later in this video. Anyways, even outside of his portrayal as a vigilante, the changes to Dick's personality tilt me off the face of the earth. I really hate how Dick has been scrubbed of any and all flaws or blemishes to the point where all he is currently is a funny himbo with a BBL. When before, despite Dick being the ideal hero right next to Superman, he still had faults in his person. This is something I'll delve into a lot more later, but I know Jason is often portrayed as having anger issues and need to constantly rein in his temper. But that was Dick, at least pre-New 52. He was the Robin with a temper prone to lashing out in response to negative stimuli that had to remind himself at times to keep his cool. Not to mention his self-loathing issues, more serious attitude, and even detective skills with the advent of Tim were washed away and or given to other characters, leaving us with the boring jobber Nightwing we have now. Which is really unfortunate because one of my favorite things about Dick was how he embodies his own methods as a vigilante. Dick believes in the good of man and makes it his mission to build bonds with others, which requires immense amounts of trust, patience, understanding, and more. In short, he has a very idealistic view of the world, but at the same time isn't blinded by said idealism. Dick is more than aware that life isn't perfect. Tragedy strikes and has the potential to change people for the worse. But at the same time, that tragedy doesn't have to define the person and negatively impact them forever. Calamity can be overcome with the help of a community or even just one good friend for you to lean on. And the person afflicted can come out the other side of whatever tragic event befell them a much better person. You see, tragedy has the ability to change someone for the better and for the worse. But when you are alone, it's very hard to make the right decisions for a multitude of reasons, which can lead people down a completely avoidable darker path that can have catastrophic ripple effects. Sure, people are completely responsible for their own actions at the end of the day, and there's always a choice. But at the same time, understanding that in these sorts of situations, the individual is playing a rigged game, due to the heightened emotions blotting out logical and irrational thought. Making the right, moral, and ethical decision in these situations takes a level of mental fortitude that almost no one realistically will have, no matter how tough they claim they are. Dick is more than aware of this because if Bruce and Alfred weren't there for Dick when his parents were murdered, who knows what he might have turned into. If Bruce didn't try his absolute damnedest to make sure Dick won't end up going into the man forever unable to fully let go of his trauma, staying forever trapped in the alley where his parents were killed like him, who knows what Dick would have turned into. If Dick didn't have the tie-ins to teach him the importance of bonds and allow him to realize his own potential away from Bruce, who knows what Dick would have turned out into. But because Dick had all these people in his life steering him in a positive direction, Dick came out the other side of his trauma a far better man than his mentor, who was a great man in his own right. Which leads into how Dick conducts himself as a solo hero. Dick builds those bonds with others and tries his best to always be a shoulder someone can lean on when they're down, so he can help lift anyone who's in that bad spot back up, hopefully steering them away from whatever bleak and destructive path they could have set out on if they didn't have someone to catch them before they fell. But to circle this back to the original point I was making, even though Dick is one of the pinnacles of heroism, he himself isn't immune to the effects of the cruel nature of life. Tragedy has struck Dick multiple times, even outside what happened with his parents, and every single time he was able to bounce back and rise above his worst impulses, such as his self-loathing and anger. Not only due to his own strong mental fortitude, but also due to his friends and family that he has built over the years. He catches people when they fall, and they catch him in turn. It's such a beautiful message to send out into the world, and it's why I love Dick so much as a character. On a personal note, I have seen and heard of so many avoidable, unfortunate conclusions to events in my life that honestly could have maybe been avoided if people had a shoulder to lean on when they were in a bad place. This might sound mega geeky, but Nightwing does inspire me to try to be there, at least for my loved ones. Admittedly, I'm not the best at it, and I have failed to live up to that ideal on numerous occasions, for a multitude of reasons. But that ideal gives me something to strive for that can help make the world a far less shitty place for me and others to live in. So,
thanks, Dick. I appreciate it.
So to wrap up talking about Night Terror's Nightwing, that's a tongue twister right there. I like how Dick was allowed to be serious and get mad in this story. I like how he was an absolute badass when it came to fighting, and I love how he kept his promise to Crane and came back to attempt to save him. Because as said before, Dick's entire thing is building bonds of trust, and he will go to hell and back in order to keep that promise, even to a villain like Scarecrow. Whew. I think at this point, I've now hit my daily quota of using the word dick in a sentence.
Dick.
And now I can move on to what most of you guys were probably waiting on, Night Terror's Robin. Honestly, I think I might have to make a second part to this video due to the raw amount of things this story has me pissy about. So the story of Night Terror's Robin follows Tim and Jason stuck in Insomnia's nightmare, confronting traumas personal to them. Pretty standard fare for this event, all things considered. Tim confronts his insecurities related to his self-worth, and Jason confronts his related to his inability to trust others. I know and have way less to say about Tim, so I'm just starting with him. To be completely upfront and honest, Tim's arc does nothing for me, and is overall uninteresting because I was never a fan of Jack Drake's death in the first place. I think the problems that plague Tim fans in the modern day started at his inception, but reached critical mass when they had his father killed and attempted to turn him into Bruce 2.0. I actually hated that era for Tim because it stripped him of anything that made him unique and interesting, and now he's still paying for that up to today. Tim was never the most unique Robin because he was made to be a reader stand-in, a replacement and an apology for what happened with Jason. He was made to appeal to the widest net possible and be offensive to no one. But he did have one thing going for him. He was the most relatable Robin in my opinion. He had a family, a dysfunctional one, but a family nonetheless, a normal social life, and the list goes on. Sure, Tim was smart, but not to such an absurd degree from my memory. He just had a really sharp deductive mind which allowed him to be an excellent strategist. DC should have leaned into that as his niche, instead of turning him into another brooding orphan taken in by Bruce Wayne. Because everyone else who falls into that category have other things that overshadowed Tim, making the third Robin kind of feel redundant and lost in the modern day. I would really love to see more stories of Tim juggling high school or hell, even college, along with being Red Robin when he had time, much like how heroes like Spider-Man would. Rather than seeing him turn into a super genius computer whiz or whatever stupid shit the New 52 was cooking. Also, please bring back this Red Robin costume. It was unbelievably peak and unique, even though the writing surrounded it was kinda ass sadly. Now, on to Jason.
You could not live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.
So Jason's nightmare, as said before, was tied around his inability to trust, which if you see my last video on Redhood, you might think I would take no issue with that, and traditionally you would be 100% on the money. I think a large part of the reason why stories like Three Jokers and more flop for me personally is because while the crux of these stories is about how each character deals with trauma or whatever, they kinda miss the root cause of what made Jason walk down the road he set out on, which kinda makes the whole thing fall flat. But to get back to the point, my issue with Night Terror's Robins doing the whole trust thing is more so a metatextual gripe. I hate how this story completely displays that DC has zero idea what to do with Jason's character. Let me explain. Jason confronting his unwillingness to trust was the big payoff to a very recent story that was supposed to completely change the trajectory of Jason's character, called Cheer. At the end of that story, he learns the value of trust and gives up his guns to 100% step into the side of the Angels. Which, even though I absolutely despise that story and the direction it's pushing him in, at least it displayed initially that DC had plans for Jason. It might not be what I like or would want, but the silver lining was Jason actually getting a consistent direction let me swallow the pill of disappointment as painlessly as possible. I was pretty fine with just not reading any more stuff revolving around Jason since it wasn't for me and simply checking out other stuff. But then, Task Force C dropped, where Jason is back at being odds with the Bat Fam. The Man Who Stops Laughing drops, where Jason is using guns with the intent to kill again. Then, Night Terror's Robins drops, where Jason's back to being a mistrustful lone wolf, bringing me back into the fold, reigniting my interest into content creation, and sparking the idea for the Problem with Modern Red Hood videos. I just couldn't live with my bitterness, and where did that lead me? Back to him. After 3 videos on this character, I thought I was truly done. I thought I was a free man. I said all that I need to, but DC, man, they just find a way to just reel you back in. So here I am on my 4th video on this character, which might spawn a 5th or 6th. Since I'm probably about 10 minutes in on this video alone, and I'm just getting started on things I want to talk about. So, anyways, my next gripe is Jason's solution to his nightmare and his overall portrayal. For some context, Jason's nightmare contains him locked in a warehouse room with Earthworm Jim, former dead edgelord, who will multiply every time Jason kills them, causing Jason to spawn, well, thousands of them.
Shit! Step off! Step out! Shit! They jumping me! They jumping me! Save your boy!
This all leads up to Jason coming up with the brilliant plan to use his shape-shifting power to morph into Rain from MK9, which goes about as well as you can expect. After getting his ass beaten for a bit, Tim comes to the rescue, allowing Jason to team up to get some much needed payback on Insomnia. Which, while I get the thematic reason for these events playing out the way they do, I do take issue with the implications. What I mean is, this scene evidently is supposed to call back to Jason's death at the hands of the Joker. From Earthworm Jim transforming to X-Men Origins Deadpool, former Dead Crowbar, to references to Sheila Haywood, the location, and more. I really don't like how the story insinuates that Jason's mistrustful nature stemmed from Bruce's failure to save him, which betrays the fundamental reason Jason came back so bitter. It wasn't because Bruce didn't save him, Jason could hardly care about that. It was actually because Jason felt betrayed due to the fact that Bruce didn't avenge his death by putting down the Joker.
I know I failed you, but I tried to save you, Jason. I'm trying to save you now.
Is that what you think this is about? That you let me die? I don't know what clouds your judgment worse. Your guilt or your antiquated sense of morality. Bruce, I forgive you for not saving me. But why? Why on God's earth? Is he still alive? Ignoring what he's done in the past. Blindly, stupidly disregarding the entire graveyards he's filled, the thousands who have suffered, the friends he's crippled. You know, I thought I'd be the last person you'd ever let him hurt. If it had been you that he'd beat to a bloody pulp, if he had taken you from this world, I would have done nothing but search the planet for this pathetic pile of evil death-worshipping garbage and send him off to hell.
The person Jason loved most, the person who meant the world to him, prioritized his code and prioritized his mission over his son, which crushed Jason's heart. This might be lacking the full context of everything that happened post Jason's death, but from Jason's view, this is exactly what happened and was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of his trust. I might be reading into it too much, but it does feel like Night Terror's Robins is implying that Jason's trust issues stem from Bruce's failure to save him rather than actually any wrongdoing on Bruce's end. Which, if that's actually the case, I'm so tired of it. I feel like DC has this weird obsession of scrubbing away any wrongdoing Bruce had in terms of Jason's story. It feels like they slowly but surely over time rewrote Jason's entire story from a troubled kid with a good heart taken in by Batman for entirely selfish reasons, which got the kid killed. Then upon his resurrection, the portrayal of finding out his very own father didn't avenge his death caused the child to fully embrace the dark road he was set on, to violent stupid kid gets taken in by caring Batman who only wanted to set this kid on the right path. But instead of listening to wise old Bruce, the kid was too consumed by anger and stupidity, which caused himself to get brutally murdered. Then upon his resurrection, he was mad at his wise saint father for not being able to be at two places at one time and save him from his very own stupid and reckless decisions. I actually want to make a video on Jason's numerous deaths across media ever since Titans Season 3 came out, and how every single adaptation of it butchers it. But I'll save that for some time in the future, so I'll just stop my little rant here. But yeah, I feel like almost every rendition of Jason's story after his death has been some massive elaborate smear campaign of his prior character, which has been mostly successful in my opinion. The vast majority of people unfamiliar with Jason's character view him as the dumb, angry, annoying, violent meathead Robin, and liken him to Raphael from TMT, which couldn't be farther from the truth. But honestly, I can't blame them. It's how Jason's been portrayed in comics for the last decade, which then trickled into his adaptations in greater media such as video games, shows, and movies. Which finally brings me back to something I touched on much earlier in this video in regards to Dick, being scrubbed of his temper, deductive nature, and more. I think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtleification of the Robins has been nothing but a detriment to them. Yes, I just made up that word, live with it. It's been something annoying me ever since I started noticing in the New 52 and onwards, but hit critical mass when I laid my eyes upon the monstrosity that is Gotham Knights Jason, where they no meme just made him into Raphael. Not saying Raphael's a bad character or trying to dunk on him by any stretch of the imagination. He's actually my favorite Ninja Turtle. I just don't think the comparisons fit at all without some massive liberties on Jason's character. It's like comparing Ted Core to Bruce Wayne solely because they're both rich and use gadgets. Or Jason Todd to Frank Castle because... oh wait, that's already a thing. Beyond the surface level stuff, like both wearing red, they are nothing alike. A perfect example of this is, well, the story I'm discussing in this video. Jason and Night Terror's Robins isn't particularly cunning and perceptive. He constantly needed Tim to explain the situation they are in to him, which isn't the worst thing ever, and wouldn't be that bad if that was the end of it. But no, my issue arises with how Jason acts throughout the story when they encounter trouble. In particular, Jason relying solely on Tim to create a plan in the moment to get them out of trouble. Jason's only method and plan to deal with the issues as displayed in this story were raw brute force and copious amounts of gunpowder. But some of you guys might say,
but somebody, that's the point of working in a team. Characters are supposed to cover each other's weaknesses, which in turn highlights their strengths, making them seem stronger together rather than apart. Tim is the smart one, like Donatello, and Jason is the muscle like Raph.
In which I'd say you guys are missing the point. My argument is that it doesn't make sense for Jason to be relying solely on Tim to make a plan under pressure in the heat of the moment, because that was originally his thing. That is the area Jason excelled at when he was first introduced. Don't believe me? Then... So to get to the point, Jason's greatest strength originally, when Winnick wrote him, wasn't in his hand-to-hand abilities as a fighter, nor did it lie in his marksmanship skills. All things considered, he was fairly unimpressive and mundane in both areas. No, instead it laid in his mind, but not in the same way as Tim or even Barbara. You see, while Tim is more strategic, usually preferring contingencies and long-winded plans that are meticulous and detailed, and Babs as Oracle was a master-level computer geek, Jason, on the other hand, is almost entirely a tactical thinker and tend to focus on the moment-to-moment interactions. The best way I'd describe Winnick's Jason was as a trickster. He was bar none the most cunning member of the Bat Fam, due to Jason's ability to process information very quickly and come up with rudimentary solutions. In short, his adaptability was his greatest weapon, and made him a beast of an opponent. A great example of this is in issues 4 and 5 of Redhood Lost Days. For some context, Jason is at this point trying to investigate and stop a terrorist attack being plotted by the English mob to frame people of Middle Eastern descent, in order to stoke Islamophobic fires in the country and get the Fed's eyes off of them, since the priorities will be on a wild goose chase after the Muslim extremists that are responsible for the attacks, allowing the mob to breathe and conduct their business in peace instead of constantly having to look over their shoulders for the Fed's prying eyes. A pretty genius plan if you look over the raw amount of death it will cause in the moment, and how much more misery the racist fires they aim to stoke would stir up. So, this is where Jason steps in. His first thought is to simply just stop this attack from going off to solve the issue, since it's the most straightforward solution that allows Jason to not blow his cover and risk his life while saving countless lives. So, he finds the staging area in a warehouse and locates the pre-prepped bombs inside, where he then turns them into duds. Easy, right? So you must wonder, what is this great example of adaptability and a tactical mind appear? Well, they show up right here. Jason gets caught during the act by the mob and proceeds to fight his way out. While things aren't ideal, they are still salvageable. Actually, more than that, fate might just be on Todd's side for once, and this might all turn out to be a good thing. But then things start to go sour fast when he hears a very familiar noise. Jason barely gets a second to see his assailant before an entire clip gets unleashed from the mag, forcing Jason to evasive maneuvers, scrambling his way for cover. So now, things have gone from bad but salvageable to just a screw up. The noise from all the commotion has definitely raised the likelihood of the cops showing up to investigate, putting Jason on a very finite time limit. This is bad for so many reasons, an actual nightmare scenario for Jason. But there is some silver lining. Now that Jason's priorities have changed from keeping these guys alive for intel to getting the hell out of Dodge as fast as possible, he is now ready to bust out his guns and swiftly clear out anyone in his way, disappearing into the night like a ghost. But there might be one small little issue facing our protagonist. Due to a stupid and careless mistake, Jason forgot to secure his side piece, allowing it to fall off his person while he was flipping and scrambling to escape the initial volley of gunfire. So now, things have gone from bad to worse to plain awful. Jason is now completely unarmed, versus an unknown amount of armed assailants on a quickly diminishing time limit, to escape and destroy any evidence of his presence in this location. This isn't a moment where you can think long and hard about your actions, and any mistake can cost you greatly. Any forgotten variable or miscalculation, no matter how big or small, can bring your end. Most people would absolutely crack in this situation, falling into despair and giving up. But no, that's not who Jason is. Somehow this crazy bastard manages to find a way to come out on top, pulling the rug from under his opponents and solving all his issues in one fell swoop. How? Well, pretty simple. Despite Jason having almost zero advantages, he did use what was available to him, and he thought up a crafty plan involving the bombs he previously turned into duds. Before his assailants pushed his cover, he turned them back into live explosives and set them off as they approached, using the momentary confusion to haul ass to the front door and take cover before he got caught up in the explosion. The crazy bastard managed to take out his assailants, removed any evidence of his presence through the fire, and threw a massive wrench in the mob's plot. All in one fell swoop, Jason managed to take a disadvantageous situation and solve all his issues with a plan cooked up in mere seconds or at most a minute. So while not ideal, things are going good for Jason. All he needs to do now is get the hell out of there. But then, he hears a very familiar sound again. And when he opens his eyes, he finds himself surrounded by mob reinforcements. So things went from bad to worse to awful, back to fine, and now they plummeted all the way down to unwinnable. Jason is now completely unarmed, with nothing to fall back on to save him from impending doom. In this situation, most would use their last couple seconds of life to maybe find peace with their end, or maybe die in self-loathing. But once again, that's not Jason. He manages to do the impossible again. He somehow improvises his way out of his own casket. With a little tried and true tactic that has been used since the birth of humanity, Jason starts to lie his ass off, mixing in truth with fabrication to make his story much more believable, even managing to dupe some of the guys aiming at him. But things aren't going to be so easy and smooth, if you couldn't tell already. The mob accosting Jason does the smart thing and calls the guy they hired to stage this attack to confirm Jason's story, which puts Jason in an awful situation. If the phone call goes through, Jason's getting one in between the eyes, no doubt. So his priorities shift to stopping that phone call by any means necessary, but he can't just snatch it or else he'll be shot, so he has to move on to plan B. Another distraction like Jason did before, but now he has mere moments to think up something and act. His distraction can't be hostile, because that will just get him turned into Swiss cheese, but has to be, well, distracting enough. to get their attention off the call and get them to lower their guard. Something that will make them feel disgusted and make Jason come off as less of a threat than he already is, bamboozling them enough to initiate part 2 of Plan B. So, Jason comes up with a genius idea to do this, which actually manages to do exactly what he needed it to. Distract them from making the phone call while lowering their guard enough for him in a split second to take them by surprise and pull the rug from underneath them, allowing Jason to take their boss hostage, somehow managing to get him out of the oven and into the frying pan. While he's not 100% in the clear, he is in a far better position than ever before, because now he has 2 advantages on his side, and we've already seen what he could do with just one. You might be wondering, what's that second thing in his favor? Well, first is him being able to capture Yuri over here and use him as a bullet deterrent. And the next advantage was actually a former disadvantage of his. That thing being the rapidly approaching cops now with an earshot that was foreshadowed before. So Jason leverages this in order to convince them to let him go and escape while they still can. More happens later, but that's enough for now. I think I proved my point. Jason, back when Winnick wrote him, was a tactical genius, being able to turn almost any situation in his favor with just a few moments of thinking things through. I'm not joking when I say, old Jason was one of the coolest characters I've read from DC, and I miss him so much. On a quick side note, I love how much setup and payoff went to this whole situation, from Jason using the bombs he originally came there to tamper with to escape the warehouse, and him using the threat of the previously mentioned rapidly approaching cops to end his stalemate with the mob and allow for his escape on the streets. All the tools Jason used were all there since the beginning. It was just all about how he would use them to his advantage, allowing Jason to display his character traits like his calculating mind filtered through his smug and snarky nature. From that shit-eating grin from when he kicks the bomb towards his assailants, to him saying goodbye in Russian just as the mobsters are about to get blown to smithereens, displaying that morbid sense of humor of his, to even his use of the phrasing stupid and careless, something he evidently took from Bruce in the past. But back to my original point, it makes no sense for Jason of all characters to be completely reliant on Tim to save their ass when he hasn't exercised his own problem-solving abilities beyond shoot the bad guy. I get the whole idea was to get Jason to accept help from others and rely on people more, but this was just a case of horrible execution because of this weird obsession lately with turning the Robins into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, Jason can't be smart in their eyes because Tim's already the smart one, completely ignoring intelligence isn't some catch-all thing. Like, people can be smart in certain areas and be completely brain dead in others. Some people are very logically orientated, but absolutely lost when it comes to anything under the jurisdiction of emotional intelligence. This also makes characters feel more real, and less like cardboard cutouts to be placed nicely into the mold made for them. What annoys me most is I feel like they could have gotten to the same conclusion without turning Jason into a brain donor. Let me explain. I think if throughout the story, Jason and Tim were bouncing ideas off of each other while they are in peril, displaying their different ways of thinking, but also causing them to clash, because of how they process things is so diametrically opposed. With Jason leaning more towards pragmatic, short-term plans that would win them the battle per se, while Tim focused more on long-winded multi-step plans that would win them the war in one fell swoop. With the flaws of each being that Jason's constant split-second decision-making leaves them open to a lot of potential oversight and lapses in judgment. Even though Jason's plans excel at getting them out of trouble in the moment, it's only that, a temporary solution to a bigger problem that would lead them to fighting an unending war. Because they'll keep going through the same cycle of a problem arising from the greater problem facing them, Jason finding a way to circumvent it, and before they can tackle the big problem, a bunch of other small ones arise that require immediate attention. While on the other hand, Tim's big picture plans require too much coordination and planning to do in the thick of things, making it so that even though Tim's plans could solve both the big and small issues in one fell swoop, them surviving to the point where he cooks something up and has everything in the right positions to initiate are unlikely. Because while they are still in the middle of fighting for their lives, situations evolve and their prerogatives change, causing an influx of information to juggle and synthesize into a cohesive plan. So the general idea of how I'll make the story go down while attempting to retain the spirit of what the original story was trying to communicate is, while Tim and Jason are fighting their nightmares, they find out they can communicate with each other, much like how the original story established. They soon after start shooting out ideas, trying to synthesize a plan to get them the hell out of there. But Jason's unwillingness to put his trust in Tim and the fluid nature of the ongoing conflict causes Tim to freeze up due to his focus on solving the big picture. Those two things, along with insomnia's torment, causes Tim to crack and start losing faith in himself, questioning his self-worth, leaving things mostly in Jason's hands. At first, it seems everything is fine, while Jason has complete control over things. But quickly they realize they haven't actually moved past their starting point. Tim and Jason then have a bit of a breakdown, like in the comic, and during it, they take a moment to talk, reaching a level of understanding with each other. Jason reassures Tim of his worth and decides to put his faith in Tim because it's the only way they are getting out. And Tim in turn puts his game face back on and accepts Jason's trust, promising to not let him down. So now, they have to work together to survive this ordeal. They have to cover each other's weaknesses and exacerbate the other's strengths. So, the general idea is it's Jason's job to come up with ideas to get them out of trouble in the moment, freeing Tim up and allowing him to focus on getting them out of the situation entirely. In which it actually works, and they escape the nightmare, much like how the comic actually goes. I feel like that's a more rudimentary but organic way to reach the same conclusion that still upholds the themes of the story while hopefully not diminishing either character in the process. But anyways, this does bring me to where I want to end this video since it's getting way too long, and I still have way more to say. But I'm going to save that for the follow-up to this video, where I go over all the popular misconceptions about Jason and attempt to debunk them. Which honestly sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, but at the same time, it's definitely going to take a while to come out sadly. Mostly due to semester and other life stuff, but fret not my dear viewers. In the meantime, while I'm working on bigger videos, I'll try to keep giving you guys content in the form of smaller, easier to make stuff that requires way less reading, editing, and more on my end. The first video of that style I want to make is going to be on the upcoming rebooted DCEU, helmed by James Gunn, so stay tuned for that, and part 2 of this video as well. Finally, please tell me in the comments, what do you think are some of the most popular misconceptions about Jason, and I'll try to go over them in my next video. I've already got a couple ideas in mind. Most notably, I really want to talk about his so-called emotional instability issues that get brought up a lot.
He's not coming. No one.
Shut up!
So, anyways, don't forget to tell me why you think I'm wrong and why I'm an idiot in the comments, and see y'all in the next rant.
Huh?
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
That's my bar.
Shit.
He copied my whole fucking
shit.
flow.
That-
He copied my whole fucking flow. Word for word,
shit.
bar for bar.